Hi, welcome back to another episode of Talent Titans. I'm super excited to bring in today's guest, Bryan, founder of Professional Sourcing Solutions and the SourceMe platform. Bryan, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's very excited to be here with you, Suki.
Perfect. So, for those people that don't know you, do you want to just give people a little bit of background as to who you are?
Right. So, like you said, I'm the founder of Professional Sourcing Solutions, which initially started out as your run-of-the-mill temporary and permanent staffing agency, working primarily in the healthcare sector. And then from there, over the past couple of years, we developed a new candidate management software called SourceMe, which we deployed into our clients, our portfolio of clients, and now have began to branch off into different sectors: retail, hospitality, and construction.
Amazing. I'm really excited to, and the piece I really want to explore is the SourceMe platform. Um, why it came about and what made you not pivot, but also add on the platform to your recruiting business. So tell us, how did SourceMe come about?
Right. So SourceMe came about from a need that my company had specifically. We worked primarily in the travel nursing industry,
Hmm.
and our clients that we had tended to have very urgent needs, meaning on a Monday we'd get a notice saying that we need X amount of nurses to staff this department, or by Friday the department's going to close. And working with these clients previously, we'd have Excel spreadsheets, email lists, all the same stuff that any agency would have, but we didn't have a very efficient way of taking the need, the posting that our client had to our network of nurses, in a way that was efficient, quick, and instantaneous. So we went out to market looking for a solution to our problem, where we wanted something that we could just say, hey, here's a posting, send it to our entire network, or send it to this specific niche in our network. And there was nothing really out there that kind of scratched that itch for us. So we decided as a company to pivot and to be like, hey, we have this great idea. Let's just build it ourselves. And
Hmm.
not being in the software development business at all, how does that go? How do I go from a drawing on my napkin to a fully functional cloud-based platform and mobile app? So that started us down this whole rabbit hole of, okay, who builds this? Can we even build this? How much is it going to cost? And how long is this going to take? So really the idea for the SourceMe platform came strictly out of a need that we had as a company, where we wanted to solve this problem of, how do I do this really efficiently and instantaneously for our clients? And then it evolved into, okay, now that we have it, how do we get our clients access to that database that we have as an agency instantly, so that they can just fill their positions themselves, and kind of take away the entire middleman from the recruitment process?
And what year was this?
Well, we started, initial development started in September of 2022, where that was just the idea. Then it turned into, by the time we got to the late fall into December, okay, now we have a framework, what we want. Let's go out to market, and let's see if we could actually build this thing for whatever our budget was and our
Yeah.
timeline. So that's when it really started, was
So
September
it's really
2022.
interesting, typical entrepreneur, right? The world is coming out of this global pandemic lockdown, and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, here's an opportunity to start a new business. Yes, there's similarities between the two. So, and that's a typical entrepreneur, but that's got to have been a scary moment, because I spoke to so many people that are just like, oh my God, no, I'm staying in my lane. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to risk anything, because we've got a global following here. I think it's important to point out that here in Canada, we had one of the longest, and I say severest lockdowns. I feel as if we're in lockdown forever, right? And
Right.
even when we started coming out. So a lot of people were like, okay, let's just go back to basics, stay in our lane. But you looked at it and you said, no, there is this need, and I'm going to do that now. That's a scary moment for an entrepreneur.
It was, especially not having any knowledge really of the development world or the technology world or anything of that sorts where I could have some sort of barriers. I'm like, okay, this is going off the rails here or there. I had to put a ton of trust into the company that I was going to be partnering with because I didn't have any in-house developers either. I had in-house recruiters, but I didn't have anyone that could do this and really put those guide rails on both sides
Let
of
me
like, hey,
just
this project is
interrupt there
really going
because,
off course.
yeah, there's a point I want to bring up here. You said you not a developer, right? So you didn't know how to create the platform, and you went and found the developers. What were
Right,
some of your thoughts going through? Because you actually chose a Canadian company. You did not do what a lot of people do, and it makes sense why they do that. They went offshore primarily from a cost saving perspective, whether that's offshore to South America, India, Eastern Europe. But you chose not to do that. What was some of your, I guess, thinking? Because you could have 100% done it a lot cheaper,
right,
right? I don't know what
right,
the how much cheaper it would have been, but certainly there would have been a significant saving. But you chose not to
right.
do that. Why?
And I get this question asked a lot. I could have just went to XYZ region for a third of the price that I paid for this platform. And for me, I'm a Canadian-based company.
Hmm.
I'm a very proud Canadian. And one of my mandates when we started this was I would love to keep this in Canada. I would love to
Amazing.
hire another, not startup company, but not one of the big players in the market. Give them an opportunity to build this for me and grow as well. So that was one of the primary focuses when I was doing my research on companies to see who I would partner with and who I have felt had a good match with. There's that gut feeling when we were going out to market to look for them because there was a ton of companies. Surprisingly enough, I thought there maybe only be a handful in Canada that do it.
Okay.
There were a lot of companies, and it really came down to having that conversation with not only the project managers and the developers to see if like, okay, can you build it? And that's kind of qualification number one. Can you do this? How much is it going to cost? And does this feel right? It's very similar to when you're doing recruitment for a client, or when you're sourcing clients. Like, is this relationship really going to work out the way we think it's going to go? And if it doesn't, do we really want to cross that barrier? But to come back to it, why I stay Canadian, it's I have this deep down pride of being a Canadian, and being a small Canadian company myself. I would love to be given the opportunities from other Canadian companies to keep everything in house in Canada, keep the servers in Canada. That's a big thing for us as well. Where are these where's my platform going to sit? Where are these
Yep.
servers, making sure there's no issues with confidentiality, crossing borders, or anything like that. That was another big issue that we had as well, where
People don't
we're going to
think
be
of
collecting
that.
a lot of information.
Yeah, people don't think of that, right? It's like, where is my data going to be stored?
Exactly.
So, and I
Yep.
love the fact that you wanted to keep the business in Canada, but also give it to a startup, up and coming, a smaller,
Right.
so almost, for lack of a better word, small business sporting small business. And I think the
Exactly.
other part of that is, and just from a recruiting perspective, if we don't look after and give the up and coming tech talent the jobs here. Now, look, I'm not a techie by any stretch of the imagination, right? But what I do know is if we're not retaining the talent in Canada, they'll leave,
Right. Exactly.
right?
And I would have loved to have my platform be that case study for that company as well, which it is, and they can take that to do bigger and better things, which is the same mindset I always had when I was sourcing clients was if I had the opportunity to do this, we could grow together and you could keep everything here. We don't always have to run offshores. And luckily, my company had the luxury of not having to do this on a shoestring budget. We had a healthy budget. Once we figured out what those budgets were going to be, it
Yep.
was, you had to sit down whenever you opened up the proposal. But we were lucky enough to be like, hey, we have the funds to do this correctly and in Canada. So why not? Why not do this here? Why not give that opportunity to a fellow small business? There's exactly like you said.
So has that in, what are we, 2024 now, right? So kind of like 2 years later. If you were making the decision today, would you still make the same decision to keep it, the development here in Canada?
I think so. And for the main reason was whenever, because like any project, you have your goals at the start. We shift and we pivoted many times during the development of this product just because we had new ideas or stuff just wasn't working the way we wanted it to. Having that ability to pick up a phone and call them and they're going to answer on the other end. You're not going through 3 or 4 different lanes of communication to speak your idea, especially because I didn't have that lingo or whenever the developers were talking to me in their language, their
Yep.
coding language. That enough was hard enough just talk to another person in Canada about it. I couldn't imagine going through that, having also a language barrier or a cultural barrier or a time zone barrier where we're making phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's the only time developers are available. Having that ability to just pick up the phone and say, hey, I don't know, understand what's going on. Can you please explain it to me in layman's terms? And having the company be able to do that to me gave me a lot of reassurance. I like, okay, this could be fixed. Let's pivot, let's change, let's do this. What else do you need to make this work correctly? And I think just having all that reassurance and having that very open communication with the partners that developed it, I would definitely go back and say, okay, I would do this again. The cost savings wouldn't be so dramatic that I would give up that reassurance that I had during the project.
So that completely makes sense to me. I guess just playing devil's advocate. If you had gone offshore and had those cost savings, because I'm just thinking of our audience, right? Somebody out there
Right,
thinking, you know what, I'd love to do this. I'd love to keep the business here in Canada or wherever they're listening in from, but they don't have the funds or, and I'm just making up a number here. So let's say this costs $500,000. Well, what else could I have done with, what else? Let's say it's a
right,
50% saving, right? So you're still saving $250,000 in the example that I'm giving. And it's a significant chunk of change that could be utilized elsewhere. What would you say to somebody that's listening and they're kind of that thoughts going through their mind saying, but I could do this, and with the money that I'm going to save, I could, for argument's sake, hire salespeople.
right.
What would you
My,
say to that? Do you think that's, I mean, what's your response to that?
well, my response is really what what are your priorities and how important are those priorities to you? If number one is we have a very strict budget and this is the only way we could develop what we're thinking of developing, and this is the only place we could do it in within that budget, then your decision's kind of made for you at that point.
Yep, fair point.
Where this is your only option. It's not going to get done unless you do it this way. Where I think if you have the ability to go beyond just, hey, how much money can I save on this? What matters more than just the money in the end? For sure, it would have been nice to have all that money back in the bank account, do other stuff with it. But I think the amount of nights I didn't have a sleepless night because I knew the company I partnered with in Vancouver was truly taking care of what I wanted them to take care of. I think that just far outweighs the money I spent. I could very much see myself losing nights and nights and nights of sleep, and how much revenue would that have lost my business of not being focused on business stuff as opposed to just 100% focus on, man, is this product being made? I have no idea. I can't call anyone. I'm not getting any updates, stuff like that. So really, in the end, if I look at it, did my company really overspend? Probably not, because I had a lot more time to do what my company was doing, was recruitment and being
Yep.
able to service my clients in the end.
What I mean, that's a real interesting point you make there, because as entrepreneurs, right, we go, 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 right? And if we have to get up at 4 in the morning to make a call, we're just going to be like, okay, we're going to get up at 4 in the morning. But to your point, we don't look at that and say, well, what am I losing? Right? That cost, whether it's in time, but also the the impact it has on your family. Because if you're waking up at 3, 4 a.m. and you're stressing, and then you're taking those calls, that's kind of not normal family life.
Right, right. And that's where I look at the non-monetary benefit of doing what I did, you know, pays off tenfold for me in the long run. Where, sure, we could have saved money, but what did I give up that's not measured in dollars and cents to save that money? And again, that's why I always go back and say I really made the right decision here to do what I did. Um, my accountant might have a different opinion, and that's fine. But for me, just like that reassurance is, and my time is also very valuable. My hours of the day are very valuable. Dealing with stuff that I have no idea how to fix, the development stuff and all that stuff, and chasing people. Um, I never had any of those issues, and I got all my time back. So really, that's why in the end, I always go, this was well worth it. This was so worth it to partner with them, because it was stressful, obviously, at some points,
Yep.
but all the other stuff of building it was never on my plate. I was able to do what I was doing with professional sourcing solutions, continue to service, and not have to divert my attention or my time at the risk of losing clients, which would have lost even more revenue in the end,
Yep.
potentially, if I wasn't focused on doing that, and I was focused on, chasing people down because, certain parts of the platform aren't working correctly, and things like that. So that's why I always go back to say, would I do it again? Absolutely. Did it cost more? Absolutely. But again, that the whole goal of building this wasn't, let's build this as cheap as possible and hopefully it works in the end.
It almost sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the deal breakers or non-negotiables for you almost was, and maybe at the time that wasn't how you'd articulated it, but you, what I'm hearing is one of your non-negotiables, deal breakers, was your time, the importance of your time, gaining back time. So you weren't going to do something that didn't do that, and keeping it in Canada. That piece where it's like 2 in the afternoon, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm actually going to speak to somebody, a real person,
Right. Right.
right? And they understand the Canadian market, and
Exactly.
and things like that, and then just, these are in no particular order, but also elevating the Canadian market.
Right. And that's what, whenever I founded professional sourcing solutions, I never had a dream of going outside of Canada because I wanted to work in Canada.
Yep.
Luckily I'm bilingual. I could work in Quebec and New Brunswick and Northern Ontario without an issue. I really have this pride of being a Canadian, servicing Canadians, working for Canadian companies, and knowing full well that comes at an added expense. You buy a product made in Canada, it's always more expensive than a product made overseas, most likely. So that being one of my personal values turned into one of my company's core values. And then when I went out to market, it would be very much against those values if I just went out and outsourced it to a third party in another part of the world and totally ignored all these values I've been preaching to all my clients and my employees as well. So I just thought, for me, it felt good to
Yep.
support another Canadian business, and the product turned out great. And together, we're elevating the Canadian market, the Canadian industry, the Canadian tech, Canadian startups, Canadian recruitment startups. So for me, it was very much a big feel good moment when it got done. It's like, yeah, we could do this in Canada, no problem.
Yeah.
We don't have to run down south of the border all the time when we need help with stuff. We could do this here.
And I think that's really important, right? It's a really important point. Canada gets lumped into the US, right? So everybody, but, and at the, fair enough, we're much smaller in terms of population and things like that. And if we're not looking after this talent, this up and coming tech talent, they're going to leave. And I know we
Right.
touched on that earlier. And what you're saying, and I wholeheartedly agree, let's keep that talent here, because if we can keep that talent here, we're working with Canadian tech companies. Not only are we keeping the talent here, we're elevating the Canadian market, but we're also helping other Canadian companies grow. Doesn't mean you can't do cross border business, but
Right.
all that's going to happen is we're a bit like the doctor's crisis, right? But you cannot get a doctor, right? So keeping that talent here. But what I do want to ask is, when you are talking to your clients, your potential clients, and when you're talking to them about how you, the core values, the keeping the business in Canada, giving our up and coming tech guys the opportunity and businesses, how are clients reacting to that?
Well, it's very dependent on the client. There's very big corporate clients that, you know, they're
Don't care.
based at, when we're talking to major billion-dollar corporations, a lot of that doesn't matter. But when we're talking to, because our platform made a pivot from healthcare and we're making a big pivot into retail, a lot of brick and mortar locations where they hire locally. They're not hiring overseas for the cashiers and the
Yep.
greeters and stuff like that. So whenever we talk about being local and being a Canadian specialists, where we only work, we tend to only work in Canada with Canadian clients, where they understand that sense of community, like, oh, they professional sourcing solutions and the SourceMe platform, they really live that that Canadian values, or the Canadian keeping everything in house, where I know that if I partner with them, that they're using Canadian talent not only at their company but Canadian tech, and we need Canadian talent to come and work at our location or whatever that store is. So I find it really opens up more doors when you're talking to people at the ground level, not corporate. Whenever you're
Yep.
calling into a corporate location, who knows where that call center is? But when you're talking to a store manager, where they're physically at the store and you're talking to them face to face about help serving them in their community with tech and services that are Canadian based, that understand the Canadian market, that there's just it's this weird thing too, like whenever you talk to another Canadian, like they're Canadian, there's this, the guards go down. I find it's not who are you, what are you trying to sell me, it's hey, let's chat about other stuff. Oh, and by the way, like, what can you do for me? And then it's this weird social element to it that I find really like I said, breaks down those barriers when we're having those conversations, that there's a sense of feeling at ease immediately
Yep.
when you're talking to someone else, when you both know, like, they're based in Ottawa and I'm based in Peterborough, and it's like, oh, okay, like, we get it, like, automatically there's this kind of connection right out the gate, and you could talk about what you're working on together, as opposed to what are you trying to sell me, and what do I even want to buy it.
I mean, that's so true, because not everybody is going to be aligned, right? That's just fact of life,
Right.
and in business. But you're right, when you're talking small bricks and mortar businesses, they're caring about their community.
Right.
And you're right, for a larger company, no disrespect or anything like that, but they're looking after a much wider community. They see Canada as one community, where Peterborough local retail shops to Peterborough are seeing Peterborough as their community,
Right.
right? And not everybody's gonna love. I love the fact that you've stayed with your core values, though. I know we're coming up to time, but let's give your tech company a shameless plug. Who were they? So anyone else listening here
Yep.
wanting to even have these conversations, or like, where do I start? I've got this great idea. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to do this. Who did you use?
So we partnered with a company out of Vancouver, British Columbia, called Essential Designs, a small company. And it just, I found them through a Google search. I
Oh,
literally,
wow.
when I started this, was how do I build a mobile app? Who builds a mobile app? That was the start of my research. That's how much I knew. And it turned into an email, to a phone call, to meetings, to what we're at today. But Essential Designs, they were fantastic from start to finish. Even we're changing our minds, what we're doing, and there's always a cost with it. Like none of those conversations were really confrontational, or I never felt the need for them to validate, like, okay, why is this costing me this much? Like, show me line by line items. Like, they they were so good at hand holding, and to be
Yep.
honest with you, because I was very honest with them out the gate, I told them I know nothing about what I'm doing here. I'm gonna send you some Word documents. Like that's how much of an idea I have. But they were so good at walking me through step by step with the process. It took 6, 7 months to develop,
Yep.
from start to finish, or from start to an actual beta version. Um, but Essential Designs, they were fantastic. They immediately, I felt very much at ease with them. That okay, um, they're really going to walk me through this. And being a smaller company themselves, my platform wasn't just another thing they were working on. They had a
Yep.
couple things, but the SourceMe platform was a major part of their build for that year, which was fantastic. Because they put that emphasis on making sure that I was getting what I paid for in the end.
Well,
And then
I'm
we
going to
went
make
on to
sure
sign
we
on more
link them in
deals
the
with them as
show
well.
notes.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure they're
Sorry, I kind
linked
of
in the
cut you
show
off there.
notes. Yeah, that's fine. We just had a bit of a delay. What I was saying is I'm going to make sure it's in the show notes. So you had to go and Google who makes a mobile app. Well, we're,
Yeah.
we're saving someone having to do that, right? As
Right.
always, let's get that in there, and that helps somebody else. So listen, we're coming up to time. Is there anything else that you want to add to this that we've missed? If people are listening to this, whether they're listening to the podcast or the video, and they want to reach out to you and they want to learn more about SourceMe, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So there's two ways. One is we have a website, professionalsourcingsolutions.ca, very much geared to the SourceMe platform, candidate management. That's what we're all about, is candidate management. Or they could simply send me an email, and my email is Bryan at professionalsourcingsolutions.ca. Gladly answer any questions you might have, even if it's not related to candidate management. If it's related to development, since I kind of dove into this with 2 feet, and I made a few mistakes on the way, or just if someone wants to build something like this for their company to solve a specific issue that their company is having, um, by all means, reach out to me. Let's have a chat. I could tell you the pitfalls I ran into, kind of if they want to get an idea of kind of budgets and timelines, we could have that conversation as well. But yeah, my website, my email address, I'll gladly respond to anyone that has any inquiries on if they want to build a specific solution to a problem that they're having.
Fantastic. And maybe there's another podcast session here of all the pitfalls you fell into. Right. Because if we can save someone else the
Yeah,
time, energy, and headache, that might be another
right.
podcast. Listen, thank you ever so much for joining us today. This has been amazing. We're going to see you at the Canadian Staffing Industry Summit, April the 17th.
I
You're
will be
actually
there.
going to be talking about this.
I will be. It'll be one of the first times I've ever done this, but I'm very much looking forward to it. Step out of my comfort zone a little bit, and hopefully have a lot of great conversations at the summit as well.
Well, look, you stepped out of your comfort zone when you went and created a platform, when you had to
Yep.
Google who creates a mobile. But look,
Yep.
thank you ever so much for your time. I will see you there. And as I said, I'm going to put all your contact details into the show notes. And look, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Suki. I really
Take
appreciate it.
care. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.